As we went over the feeding of the 4,000 on Sunday, we see that it's Jesus moving into the Decapolis, this Gentile region, to show the disciples that he is not just about a life for Israel, but also for the Gentiles, for everybody. And that's so easy for us. I mean, even as I preach that, I can kind of get the looks like, yeah, we know that. It's just so commonplace for us now. And even as we read the Bible, we sometimes wonder, like, what was the problem with Israel? How did they miss the Messiah? I mean, it's so clear in Isaiah and all the prophecies. I mean, even from the beginning, it's just so clear to us now. But we have to realize, first of all, hindsight's 2020. These people were living this in real time. And the second thing is that Israel isn't really unlike us at all. There are so many times that you and I, in our daily life, as we're walking and living out, miss the Messiah. We miss Jesus Christ working in our life all the time, for the same reason that Israel in part missed the Messiah. See, they're in this Decapolis, and Jesus is proclaiming compassion on these people, and the disciples are distraught. They're not understanding exactly what's going on. Israel completely missed it because they thought that God was sending a Messiah to lead them out of the Roman rule, to squash their enemies. Ultimately, Israel thought that God was sending a Messiah to make their lives easier. How often, if we're honest, do our prayers go up into heaven? And ultimately, if we break them down and look at the heart or the root of those prayers, it's, God, make my life easier. Make my life easier. God didn't send the Messiah to glorify Israel, which in essence is what they were asking. Make our lives easier that we might be glorified. That's not why God sent the Messiah. God sent the Messiah so that God would be glorified. We have this relationship with God, not so that we're glorified, but so that He is glorified. So God is about God's glory. And He's created us to reflect His glory, to be about glorifying Him. You and I are at our most peace and our most happiness when we're glorifying God. We think or buy into the lie that we're at our most peace or at our most happiness when life is like a flat lake, when there are no difficulties and trials and enemies and all of this stuff. We go to God, remove all of this stuff that I might be happy ultimately so that we would be glorified. It's not the purpose of life, and it certainly isn't the path to peace or happiness. That's a lie. Happiness is glorifying God. So what I've learned a long time ago, and I'm not setting myself up as the example, because I'm certainly not the example of this, but I need to constantly remind myself that my prayers, especially in times of difficulty, in times of whether seemingly enemies around me or just any kind of trial, that my prayers should not be, God, remove this trial, make my life easier, but God, how can I glorify you during this difficulty or this trial? And what I found was, when I was asking God, and when I do ask God to remove the trials and the difficulties in my life, I become hypersensitive to those trials and difficulties. I don't handle them very well. I become filled with anxiety and fear and depression and discouragement. These things just kind of consume me, and I just kind of hold my breath until we get to the other side, and I miss the glory of God. I miss His hand in all of that, and I miss what James talks about, that we walk through those things that we might become perfect. It's a refining process, that we may become perfect in what? Perfect in glorifying God, which is why I was created. I am at my most peacefulness and my most happiness when I'm glorifying God. That is why I exist. That's why I was created. That's why the Messiah come. That is why I'm in a relationship with Him. When I am praying, God, how can I glorify you through this trial and this difficulty? The trial and the difficulties don't leave, but peace returns. And I'm looking at things completely different. And may not be comfortable. Certainly, I'm not comfortable through a trial or a difficulty. But I'm looking to glorify God, and what happens is I see God. I see God in the midst of all of that, and I can't help but then proclaim, even though this was happening, even though all this stuff was going on, I saw God there the entire time. That God is good. That is so easy to say. I always hear people say God is good when something went their way. But God is good all the time. Can you proclaim that it is well with your soul no matter what? Can you say that God is good even when it seems like everything in life is up against us? The only way that we can do that is if we understand that our job is to glorify God. And if we're seeking to glorify Him no matter what. God does not exist for your happiness. God does not exist to glorify you. It's a role reversal. God cares about you, and He's going to provide for you. There's no doubt about that, but that's not why He exists. He exists primarily for His glory. And you and I exist to glorify Him.